Hey everyone, ready for another deep dive? This week we're looking at a whole bunch of stories from New Zealand, straight from the NZ Lanka News English Bulletin. We've got everything from the government shaking things up to, well, nature shaking things up. Should be interesting.
It's interesting how this week's news all seems sort of connected, like New Zealand's at this point where they're dealing with the economy, the environment, even how they get their news all at once. It's kind of wild, actually.
Yeah, no kidding. So where do we even start? Well, this new electricity policy from the government, that's huge, right? They're really pushing for cheap electricity for everyone.
Oh, yeah, for sure. This new policy is a big deal. It's not just about keeping the lights on. It's about making sure those lights are powered by, wind, solar, all that good stuff. They want to double how much renewable energy they use and make sure New Zealand's electricity is affordable, like globally.
Wow, that's a big goal.
Yeah.
I wonder how businesses are going to handle all this.
That's the million-dollar question. For businesses, especially those that use a ton of energy, this changes the game. They're going to have to adapt, go green, but at the same time, they got to stay competitive. It's tricky.
For sure. And speaking of big changes, we've got to talk about New Zealand's work visa system, right? They're bringing in this new National Occupation List, the NOL. That's got to be a big shift for anyone thinking of working over there.
Oh, absolutely. See, they're moving away from that old ANZ ESCO system to this new NOL thing. Basically, they're trying to fine-tune things, match the visa system with what the New Zealand job market actually needs, which of course means that visa applications and workforce planning, that's all going to look different now.
So November 20th, that's the day, right? The NOL kicks in.
Yep, November 20th. Mark your calendars. It'll be really interesting to see how this affects different industries. Like, will it be easier or even harder to get skilled workers from overseas? Will it change the makeup of the workforce? Lots to think about there.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, let's switch gears for a sec. Talk about public health. New Zealand's putting a lot of effort into getting those childhood immunization rates up.
Definitely a good move. They're putting $1 million into training Plunket nurses to give out vaccines, especially in those areas that don't usually have great access.
That's really smart.
Yeah.
Plunket's got that, trusted reputation, families know them.
Exactly. They're going for a 95% immunization rate for kids under 2. It's ambitious, but hey, you gotta aim high, right? Especially when it comes to keeping everyone healthy.
Totally. Speaking of things that can affect public health, let's talk about cyclone season. Looks like the North Island might be in for some rough weather.
Yeah, NIWA and the Met Service are both saying there's a higher than normal chance of tropical cyclones this year. So, heavy rain, crazy winds, rough seas, all that fun stuff. Especially for those on the North Island, it's time to get prepared.
Better safe than sorry. Oh, and speaking of nature, have you heard about Mount Ruapehu? Apparently, the lake in the crater is unusually cold this year.
8 degrees Celsius? Can you believe that? That's like a 50-year low for Te Waimo.
Wow. Should we be worried? Is that a bad sign?
No, it's cool. Literally, haha. The volcano's still chill, alert level is low. But it's still super interesting, It reminds you how much we still don't know about volcanoes.
That's true.
Yeah.
Speaking of changes, the media world's going through some stuff too.
They're
TVNZ, they're restructuring, right? And there's talk of them getting rid of their website and app.
Yeah, big changes. It's like everything's moving to video, TVNZ's putting all their eggs in that basket with their News platform. They might even shut down the One News website and app by, get this, February 2025.
Wow, that's a huge deal. A lot of people use their website. Makes you wonder, is this the end of news websites as we know them?
It really makes you think, are we all going to be getting our news from videos soon? Will newspapers go the way of the dodo bird? How we get our news is definitely changing, that's for sure.
Definitely a lot to think about. And speaking of thinking,
it really is wild. Thinking about this electricity thing some more, I gotta wonder, will pushing for cheaper electricity actually slow down, the whole going green thing?
that's the thing, isn't it? Going green, it's not always cheap.
Right. It's complicated. I mean, cheaper power might mean people actually switch to those greener options, right?
Yeah.
But then again, if the focus is just on keeping prices down, will the government want to spend the money to actually build all that new green stuff? The infrastructure, that's a tough one.
For sure. It's all about balance, I guess. Which, speaking of balance, this whole national occupation list thing, what could go wrong there?
Well, some people are worried it might make things harder for businesses, especially those that need really specialized people. Like if the NOL is too specific, it might be hard to find those super skilled workers, especially in those new cutting edge fields.
That makes sense. And what about how much people get paid?
Yeah.
Could this new system mean lower salaries for some jobs?
It's possible. I mean, if suddenly there are way more workers in a certain field because of the visa changes, yeah, salaries could go down. But then again, it's not that simple. The economy's a beast, right? There are tons of other things that affect wages.
True, true. Okay, totally changing gears now, but I wanted to go back to those childhood immunizations. Getting Plunket nurses involved, that just seems like such a good idea.
Oh, for sure. They're in the community, families trust them. That's so important, especially with something like vaccines where people might be, hesitant.
Exactly. It's about meeting people where they're at, giving them the facts, making them feel comfortable.
100%. And while we're talking about being prepared, we can't forget those folks on the North Island, with cyclone season coming up.
Right. Any word on how bad it might be? Any areas that are going to get slammed worse than others?
It's still a little early to say for sure. NIWA and the Met Service are watching things closely. But yeah, the coast is always going to get hit hardest with cyclones, right?
Yeah.
Storm surges, erosion, all that.
True, true. Good reminder to be ready, just in case.
Always be prepared, that's my motto. Okay, shifting gears again now, back to that super cold lake up in Mount Ruapehu. That's just wild. What could even cause that?
Right. It's like something out of a movie.
Volcanoes are crazy, man. Could be changes underground, the hydrothermal system, or maybe rainfall, groundwater levels, even the volcano just like shifting a tiny bit. It's hard to say for sure.
So they're not freaking out about an eruption or anything, but it's definitely something they're keeping an eye on.
Oh, absolutely. Stuff like that. It gives scientists clues, helps them figure out what's going on inside a volcano, maybe even helps them predict eruptions one day.
It's crazy, right? Like, nature just does its own thing. Okay, let's talk about TVNZ some more. This whole video thing, you think that's the future of news? Everyone's always watching something on a screen these days?
Yeah, it's definitely a trend, right? The way people get their news is changing so fast. In video, it's just like immediate, Especially for younger people, it's just natural. I wouldn't be surprised if we see more and more news going that way.
Imagine that. No more news websites, just videos, videos, videos. It's kind of wild when you think about it. But hey, before we go too far down that rabbit hole, let's get back to that electricity policy for a sec. Cheaper power, that's great. But could there be, downsides for people in the long run?
Oh, for sure. We got to think long term, right? I mean, sure, everyone loves saving money, but what if focusing on cheap electricity now means we don't invest in the good stuff for later? The tech, the infrastructure, all that. We might end up with a tower grid that can't keep up.
Right? It's like,
Sure.
Why pay more now for a better phone plan when you can get a cheap one, right? And then, bam, you're stuck with crappy service and no data.
Exactly. And speaking of long-term impacts, we got to talk about this whole NOL thing and immigration. Could this new system mean, less diversity in New Zealand's workforce? It's something to think about.
Yeah, it's a tough one. You want skilled workers, but you also want to keep New Zealand open and welcoming to everyone, right? It's about finding that balance.
100%. And it'll be super interesting to see how this all plays out, with the NOL and everything. It's going to be a bit of a roller coaster, I think.
This whole deep dive has been a wild ride, honestly. We've talked about so much, the government, the environment, how people get their news, even volcanoes. It's like everything's changing all at once in New Zealand.
That's what's so cool about the news, though, right? It reminds you that the world's always moving and shaking.
Totally. Well, that's about it for this deep dive into New Zealand. We've covered a ton. Electricity, work visas, that crazy cold lake, the whole TVNZ shakeup.
Don't stop here, though. Keep digging into these stories, see what else you can find. There's always more to learn.
So true. And hey, with TVNZ maybe ditching their website, you might want to learn how to make a killer video, just in case. Who knows? Maybe TikTok's going to be the next big news source. But until then, stay curious, keep asking questions, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.